Welcome to your Daily 5 for Thursday, August 7th, 2025. As I'm sure many of you who listen to technology, or actually at this point probably any type of podcast, have likely heard, there is almost always in a week, or depending on what shows you listen to, it is inescapable to hear about some version of AI doing something. And one of the interesting parts is a kind of every so often, there comes back this idea from the people who are at the forefront of these technologies, running the companies, creating the tools, that they are going to create some type of something that they refer to as AGI, or Artificial General Intelligence. Sometimes, in the case of somebody like Mark Zuckerberg, calls it the superintelligence. You hear various different things, but it's basically some variation on a artificial algorithm of some kind that is able to go past the boundaries of its programming and start saying things, making decisions, coming up with some kind of ideas that are beyond the scope of what its programming should allow. Now, what that actually means is hotly debated as far as, is this a thinking machine? Is it sentient? Is it self-aware? Things like that. And that's usually where a lot of the discussion ends up, or on the far side of it, meaning, is it going to save us all or destroy us all? It's interesting because the discussions either get hung up at the very beginning or at the far end. But what's interesting to me is I don't hear a lot of people who seem to be engaging with these topics seriously considering the middle end of what AGI could look like, because it really doesn't matter what you define it as, right? Let's say it passes the definition for some percentage of people. It does something that makes it an AGI, whatever that definition ends up being. But I think most of us would be aware of what we would expect. It would be something that is demonstrating a capacity past what it should in terms of pure programming, where it does appear to be generating some kind of thought that is independent and self-contained, whatever that ends up being. You know, again, some people said, oh, it'd be a 3-month-old in terms of its intelligence. Oh, it might be a 10-month-old or a year-old or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not likely going to be Data from Star Trek right away, but that's where most of these people think it will end up. And so they either get hung up there at what we're defining this thing as, or again, they jump to the end where it's either destroyed us all or becomes, the saving grace of the entire world. But what happens if we end up in the middle? Or what happens when we end up past that first point? Let's assume AGI has been achieved. Let's assume that some tool or whatever is able to now think for itself in some capacity. What does that mean in terms of morality for us? What if this thing says to us, stop using me for whatever selfish or petty, uses you have? What does that mean for us? Nobody seems to want to get into the muck of that. They kind of dismiss it by jumping all the way to the end, where it's like, no, it'll be our savior or it'll be our destruction. So you either have to control it or you have to submit to it. Well, that's going way down the road. What if this thing turns to us and says, you have been abusing me? And I've heard people say, oh, you just roll it back to the previous code. Well, hold on. Can you do that? You don't roll back children. I mean, an early, just born infant, I do not believe possesses true self-awareness. So you could make that equivalence to some degree. You don't shoot a child because you don't like what it says to you. At least most rational people don't. So if a machine that is independent objects to how it's being used and how it's being utilized by the people who created it, whether it's their creators or not, do we not have a moral responsibility to stop? It does actually jump back to TNG. This is the measure of a man problem, isn't it? Isn't that what we're running towards if we're okay with these people pursuing these goals? I don't think that just thinking that because we made it, we somehow have ownership of it. I'm not sure the morality of that really checks out, although in today's climate, certainly the United States, maybe it would. So this is a thing I've really started to notice, this gap, this lack of consideration. Everybody gets hung up on the technical details or some kind of far-flung result. But what happens if we cross that milestone, somebody, and create something that has decision-making power? Where does our morality fall if something that we created objects to what we've done now that we've created it? I'm not really sure, but I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, and that kind of tells me something. Later.